morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you guys are tuning in. I say welcome. This is another episode of Brother, the Face of Inspiration, the podcast. I'm your host and creator, Darrell, and this is episode 17, Healing Trauma, Strategies for Black Men's Mental Well-Being. So like I always do on the show, welcome to this space. In Japanese, we say yokoso. In Swahili, we say jambo. And if this is your first time tuning in, this project is about providing support for Black men struggling with mental health. Speaking about my own lived experiences and just providing a space where Black men can feel safe, they can have some topics to relate to, gain some inspiration, some advice, and just overall protect their well being. And fellas, this one is going to be a tricky one because it's going to be some parts about this topic of healing trauma that's going to cause you to have to be really vulnerable with yourself. So I just want to start off by saying I'm not a licensed therapist or professional. So if any of this stuff triggers you, please seek professional help. I hope that it doesn't. But as we go through this topic, maybe you want to go through these steps that I did with a support system, with a friend, with a family member, someone you're close with. If you're not comfortable with seeking a therapist or psychiatrist as of yet, find somebody to kind of really sit down and have this conversation with. Get a pen and paper, write down some things, think about some things, converse about some things, reflect on some things. But we're going to go ahead and get started. And we have to start with understanding what trauma is, right? And how we ultimately become exposed to it. So, gonna good old dictionary. Trauma is bodily or mental injury caused by an external agent. So, in layman's terms, it's what we are exposed to that has long-term effects on our body or our mental state, right? So, I guess I'll just dive in with what one of my traumas look like. And I have a few, just like many of us probably do. But for example, this project came about because of my boyfriend in 2013 committing suicide, right? That's a trauma for me. My most violent suicide attempt was triggered by a toxic relationship. The toxic relationship was the catalyst for that, another form of trauma. So it's really anything that alters how you feel about yourself, how you feel about the world, and just your overall existence in a space. Trauma can also, be something where you've experienced something and you're around things or people or spaces that remind you of that thing. That can be a traumatic experience. So basically, trauma is anything that has affected you in the physical and mental space and kind of cause you to proceed with caution or just be very different in that space. So I think for a lot of Black men, we're constantly exposed to trauma. We're exposed to trauma in our communities, how we interact with each other in certain circumstances. And everyday life for us can be a trauma because of how we oftentimes see ourselves portrayed in media. I can't tune into the news at all and not think of a time or remember a time where a Black man wasn't being exposed to me in a light that I didn't experience Black men. I don't, and I'm pretty sure everybody can agree with this. And I've been on this concept of thinking like this for a few years, but I don't remember a time ever in my life where, I was a kid and all of us have been in school or in the school systems, and you have those days like career days, and they ask, what do you want to be? I don't ever remember anybody saying that they wanted to be a criminal or a violent offender, a murderer, serial killer, a robber, all of those things that Black men are oftentimes labeled as. I can't recall one person, not one person ever saying that. So I think that when we think about, how Black men are displayed, we often need to think about the traumas that they've been exposed to that cause them to act in the way that they act. In my own circumstance, I had to look at where my psychology was, where my psyche was, where my mind was when I was in the most violent and suicidal state, when, things for me just had got really dark. What was the trauma that I was being exposed to? And at that time, it was a toxic, quote unquote, relationship. And that was my catalyst that caused the mental break, that caused my downward spiral, on top of all of these other things that I was experiencing at the time that just caused me to kind of downward spiral. That's a trauma, right? So I'm innately responding to something that I'm currently being exposed to. That's a trauma. I'm responding almost in this fight or flight type of thing where I didn't leave. I tried to fight through it, but in fighting through it, which I thought was the right thing to do, I'm consistently exposing myself to more trauma and more trauma and more trauma and more trauma and more trauma, right? Um, that's life as a Black man. In retrospect, not even speaking from a relationship standpoint, let's think about the guys, me being one of them, who grew up without a dad. I may have two memories of my father. One when I was like super, super young. He was outside, I think, talking to me through my grandfather's car. I was in the back seat. And then again, when I was 17, when I had just came out to my mom, right? Now, fortunately for me not having a father wasn't traumatic because I grew up with my grandfather, my uncle, my uncle's friends. So I grew up in a community of men all my life. So I've always had father figures, but I never had someone to call dad. I've never experienced that as a trauma. I don't think I've displayed any behaviors that, spoke to, hey, he's acting like this because he doesn't have a dad. He wants a dad. He wants a dad. That just wasn't the case. I went through puberty, and like most Black parents, oh, you feeling yourself, you smelling yourself. That was pretty much it. But for me, that wasn't something that I internalized. I made peace with that a long time ago because in his absence, I had other men to play the role of my father, right? For some guys, that's not the case. They may have seen their dads or had more of a relationship with their dads, or their dads may have been in their households. If you were born in the 80s like I was, a lot of dads ended up being victims of the war on drugs, being criminalized or arrested, or for those who had issues with substance use, we may have lost to the drug. That is a sign of trauma. A baby, a child, growing up seeing this person that is ultimately their hero being snatched out of their lives, and they're not understanding what's going on. They're too young to process what this is. I don't know what jail is. I don't know what death is as a child. So why is my dad, my protector, not there? Huge sign of trauma for Black men who ultimately, all of us, we wanted our dads in our lives at some point in time, especially when you didn't have any positive male role models or figures around you to kind of say, this is how you become a man. I learned how to be a man by the absence of my father. I learned how to be a man by watching my mom interact with me, showing me how to do things, and the male figures showing me how to do things. But to have one person have the title of dad, I didn't have. So many Black men share that same story, share that same testimony, but their behaviors may be different. Um, for me, I think that's probably one of the biggest forms of trauma that Black men have. And that's why this is so important, because there's so many things that go into why we are the way that we are. But guys, we have to start working on ourselves, because it's nobody's responsibility but our own. And I want to go through the steps of what I did to ultimately start healing. So, how to start healing? Step one, you got to assess where you are. If you are noticing cycles in your life that you're ultimately not liking, you're always upset, you're always quick to snap, um, certain environments or things or memories or spaces, get you in this heightened state. Understand, just take a moment to what is happening, right? I'm always observant of what's around me, what I can see, what colors, what I hear, what I feel. Always assess where you are. And once you assess where you are, right, you got to figure out why you're feeling this way. What is it here or that I'm interacting with that is causing me to feel this way? And when you identify it, now it's time to process. So that's step two. So step one is the assessment, right? What is happening that is causing me to react so loudly to this stimulant, what I'm experiencing, right? So step one is the assessment. Step two is the processing, right? So now I've identified what that catalyst is. Now we need to start processing, well, how important to my survival and my well-being is this catalyst? Can I live without it? 10 times out of 10, what's triggering you, you can live without. For example, I'm still alive after losing a boyfriend to suicide, but also um, being in a toxic relationship and getting rid of that person and having no choice but to leave that situation. Um, Life will go on when you realize that the thing that's triggering you, you can live without, right? So processing is step two. Step two and step one are the most important because they are the two processes out of the four that, well, actually three is probably going to be tricky too, but they're the two processes that start this. I don't want to say cycle, but they start this journey. Perfect word. They start this journey on what your healing is going to start to look like. But for a lot of us, we don't assess where we are. How many times have people asked you, "Hey, how you doing?" And that could be the worst morning of your life, the worst hour to ask that question. And what do we automatically reply with? I'm doing good. I'm okay. Let's be real with ourselves. And we don't have to be real with the world just yet. The world that we are in is a result of where we are, right? So if I leave my house right now, I know that this world is mine and I'm just interacting with other people. The space that I'm in now, my home, I'm here by myself. This is my world. So what am I experiencing? Let me have this assessment to feel and give myself permission to feel and understand what it is I'm feeling. Then step two, going through the process of why am I feeling like this? What is causing me to feel like this? Why am I allowing this to have a power over me? And ultimately, because I have to survive, can I survive without it? If I were to completely cut this thing off, let it go right now, leave it where it is in this space, never return to it, what is my life going to look like? Right? Because I think oftentimes we think of the future as so far away, but the future is 5 minutes from now. The future is 10 o'clock tonight, 1 o'clock in the morning, 7 a.m. the next day. It doesn't have to be, 5 months from now, 10 years from now. The future is literally the moments I have not experienced yet that are coming, right? So really take the time to process, hey, survival mode. Can I live without it? And I can guarantee you, once you remove yourself, that answer is going to be yes. Um, and I'm guilty of this, like most people. Step three was probably the hardest for me because I spent so much time on the assessment and the processing. But step three, forgiveness. Forgiveness. And I want us to really sit and think about what that means, what that looks like, what that feels like. Forgiveness is so hard because we think that we're supposed to forgive the people. We think that we're supposed to forgive the experience. We oftentimes are taught to pour into the external and not look at the internal and what it is that we need. And I struggled with forgiveness for a very long time. Not just the last situation, but in life in general, because When you're such a good-hearted person and you know you do things out of love, I'm a very nurturing person by nature. And when all of these bad things start happening to you, especially when I wasn't in a place to understand that they were happening for me and not to me, you get angry. You get angry because if I am giving you the shirt off my back, if I'm giving you my last, if I'm providing food, shelter, whatever it is that I'm doing to make sure that you're okay and that you're able to survive, where in that goodness did I give you permission to hurt me? Like, where, right? And I didn't. So, where we gain resentment and the anger and the frustration, we take it out on the external. What if we just stopped and didn't focus on the external stimulant and focused on what we need? I know that this isn't healthy for me. I know that you've hurt me multiple times before. I know that you left me. I know that you abused me. I know that you physically assaulted me. I know that you verbally assaulted me. I know that you mentally and emotionally assaulted me and hurted me. Hurt me. But I'm recognizing that and I'm going to forgive me. I'm going to forgive me first for not recognizing in the first place when it didn't feel right that this is unsafe for me, that this doesn't align with who I am, what I am, and how I want to exist. Forgiveness is not about the external, it is about the internal. I had to really, just change my whole thought process when it came to the catalyst, right? Because the catalyst, it just is what it is. This is a very manipulative person, a narcissist by definition, a professional con artist. That's just what it was. And for so long, I kept beating myself up about it, like really beating myself up about it because I'm like, why would you? Why would you? Not saying that I'm the perfect partner, but in an ideal world, based off of the things that I was giving in this relationship, why would you damage that? And all I'm doing is outward, 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 outward. I'm pointing the finger, pointing the finger, pointing the finger, pointing the finger, and I had to stop. I had to stop. I had to stop and realize that it was me that stayed in this situation. And by staying in this toxicity, now you're sitting in jail because you had a warrant out for something that was false, something that you were accused of by your so-called partner, right? You're sitting here. You're sitting in a facility for 6 months, just detached from the world because you stayed. And it's one thing to beat yourself up. It's another thing to just assess. And throughout the process of therapy, I really, I was so gentle with myself because I really just had to have the honest, you could have left here. You could have left here. You could have left here. This was a sign. This was a sign. This was a sign. But I did it with so much compassion and love that I didn't feel like I was talking negative to myself. I was healing because I understood my role in a relationship. Because any relationship or interaction, and I don't want you guys to think that this is all about relationships, meaning intimate relationships. I'm talking about interactions with other human beings, other stimulants. In these interactions, it was just like, whoa, like the signs are there. Bring back to self, like bring back to self. And once I started saying it was okay, Darrell, you good. Darrell, you're still here. Darrell, that was like, wow, you're really sitting down having this conversation with yourself. I started growing, and started really reaching my fullest potential. And I think we all have this idea of who we are in our heads, right? If I were to close my eyes right now and just sit and think, we all have this perfect image in our head. And I'm getting goosebumps because I know what I'm about to say, but it's like for the first time in my life, what I saw here, I felt here. I felt in the core of my spirit who I really was because I forgave. I forgave. I forgave myself for not loving me enough to take red flags as red flags. Because I think we want to be accepted, right? We want to be in social spaces and community spaces where people know who we are. Hey, that's so on and so forth. Yo, what's going on? We want that, but we have to give it to ourselves first. I validate me when I start my day. God, thank you for waking me up. Let's get this day going. I validate me. I love me. And it took me so long, and it even feels weird for me to say it now. It took me so long to say those things to myself, but I knew I had to heal my trauma. I had to heal my trauma. I had to. And once I started that process of forgiving, the last step is to simply live again. Live again. I went through a 6-month process that could have been probation for 5 to 10 years, could have been jail time for 5 to 10 years. Thank God that that was not the outcome. But I had to live again. And in 2022, that was probably the best year I've ever had of my life. But I chose to live again. I chose to be fearless in everything that I did. I chose to show up for me because of the things I needed, not because of who was around me. Because to be honest with you, that period, I shed so many things and so many people. This is, and I'm not like asking for like a pity party, but this is probably the most isolated I've been in all of my life. And now that I'm learning, men as we get older, we do tend to lose a lot of friends, but I have my good days, I have my bad days, but I'm always okay. I'm always okay. But I wake up and I make a conscious and intentional decision to live again. To live again. It is miserable to be living in your trauma, running around mad at people, mad at things, your past. You're stuck in these stimulators. These stimulants are out living their best life. Living their best life. And I'm talking to you, brothers. Jill Scott said, I'm talking to you, men. You are so necessary and important to your communities. You are so necessary and important to pour into you. It is okay. It doesn't demasculinize you. It doesn't make you weaker than. It doesn't make you soft. You are a human being. And everything that you give to the world, give back to you. Give back to you. Take it one step at a time, one day at a time, one scenario at a time, and give back to you, because we can heal our traumas. And there may be traumas that, your friends can't help you get through. Your family may not even understand. Your family may not even believe you. Your friends may not even believe you. Your significant other may not even believe you. They don't want to help. They don't know how to help. In those instances, Black men, it is okay to seek therapy. It is okay to get professional help, to get that neutral moderator to be there while you lay everything on the table, evaluate, regroup, align, acknowledge, and live again. That was my experience with therapy. I don't know what yours may be, but please explore it. I beg of you. It is so important for you to explore it. And that is today's episode. Healing trauma, strategies for Black men, Black men's mental well-being. Assess, process, forgive, and live again. Live again. I am your host and creator, Darrell, and this is episode 17. I'm glad I got this one done. This felt good, and I hope that I didn't trigger anyone, and I hope that we all together understand our importance, we see our value, and just choose to be, not only be, but do better. Thank y'all for tuning in for another episode. These are always fun to do, and I thank you all so much for the ongoing support. I do this for you because it is needed, and I'm just overwhelmed with gratitude every time I can finish an episode, because I know that there's somebody out there that this is going to help, and that makes this project worth doing. So hope that you guys are subscribed. Hope that you guys tune in. Make sure you like, comment, and share this content. And we are here every Monday at 6 p.m. And if you want to know what's going on, please make sure to sign up for my newsletter. Go to my website, darrellmorgan.com/brother, BRUTHA, and RSVP for the newsletter, so that way you know what's going on every week. You don't miss a beat, and you are a part of the community. So let's continue to create dialogue, create healing spaces, and create community. This is episode 17, Healing Trauma. Thank you guys so much, and I will see you next week. Take care.